I have never been one to believe in ghost stories or supernatural phenomena. My world is built on numbers, logic, and tangible evidence. I'm a financial analyst. My life revolves around spreadsheets, budgets, and forecasting. The work requires meticulousness and intense concentration, and I often find myself working late, sometimes until the wee hours of the morning, in the near absolute silence of the modern office building where I work. The building was a structure of glass and steel, with pure white walls, polished floors that reflected bright fluorescent lights, and a state-of-the-art security system with motion detectors everywhere. By day, it is a bustling hub of activity, but when the sun goes down and the last employees leave, it takes on a quiet, almost solemn look. I used to love that quietness. It helps me focus, complete the last numbers before returning home. That silence used to bring a feeling of peace, a private space to think. But then, everything began to change, slowly and almost imperceptibly, until a feeling of insecurity crept into every hidden corner of my mind. The first time I heard them was on a Tuesday night, a few months ago. I'm trying to complete a complex forecast for a large client. The clock on the computer screen flashed 1:58 a.m. The only space around me was the steady hum of the central air conditioning system and the gentle, almost hypnotic click of my fingers gliding on the keyboard. I'm deep in the world of numbers, examining every line and every column looking for any errors that could ruin the entire project. Then I heard it. Footstep. They are not fast, they are not in a hurry. Slowly, steadily, rhythmically. It was as if someone was leisurely walking down the shiny tiled hallway outside my closed office. The sound is clear, decisive, and unmistakable. My first thought was the cleaning crew. The building employs a small crew, who usually work around midnight or a little later. Maybe I was so engrossed in work that I lost track of time, and they're still around somewhere. I stopped typing, tilted my head and listened. My ears picked up another sound of footsteps, softer, then another. They seemed to be fading away, but something is not right. The cleaning crew often makes more noise, the rattling of carts, the hum of vacuum cleaners, sometimes the sounds of soft talking. These footsteps were alone, echoing in absolute silence, and they often turn off the hallway lights in the working area to save electricity. I waited a few more seconds. There are no other sounds. There was only the sound of steady footsteps. They sounded deliberate, cautious, almost furtive. A feeling of curiosity mixed with a bit of worry began to arise. I stood up, feeling my joints stiffen slightly after many hours of sitting still. I walked to the office door, the metal doorknob cold to the touch. I opened the door. The hallway was in dim darkness, with only weak light from the emergency exit lights at the end of the hallway. Just as I thought, the main light was off. "Hello," I called softly. My voice sounded so small and lost in the vast space. There was no reply. There was only the hum of the ventilation system. I ran my hand up the wall and turned on the hallway light switch. Bright white light shines, dispelling the darkness. I looked left, then right. The hallway is long and empty. All other office doors are closed and locked. The floor is clean, without a trace. I shrugged, trying to reassure myself that I had just misheard. Maybe it's noises from upstairs, or the old plumbing is acting up. Large buildings sometimes make strange sounds when the temperature changes or the HVAC system is working hard. I went back into the office, closed the door and locked it. But as I sat down in my chair, I couldn't completely shake the strange feeling that I wasn't alone. There was an invisible tension in the air that I had never felt before. The next night, I stayed late again. Work is piling up and I want to tackle as much of it as possible. Around 2 a.m., when fatigue began to take over, I heard footsteps again. This time, they sounded heavier, more decisive, echoing clearly on the floor. They seemed to be getting closer to my office. My heart beats a little faster. This time I was sure it wasn't my imagination. The sound is so real. I stood up immediately, not wanting to miss anything. I had to fiddle around a bit with the door lock because I always lock it when I work alone at night. When I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, the lights went out again. I turned on the switch. Once again, the hallway was completely empty. Not a single person in sight. This time, I didn't just look. I decided to go check it out. I walked down the hallway, trying the doorknobs of other offices. Everything is locked tight. I walked the entire length of the hallway to the elevator area. I pressed the elevator call button, just to see if someone was inside or had just used it. The elevator door opened. The cabin was empty and silent. An uneasy feeling began to overwhelm me. My chest ached a little from anxiety, but curiosity also rose strongly. How could such clear footsteps disappear into nothingness? There is nowhere to hide in this hallway. I told myself to stay calm. Maybe I'm too tired. Maybe it's really just building noises that I've never noticed before. I returned to my desk, my shoulders tense. I tried to bury myself in work, in dry numbers, hoping their logic could dispel this irrational feeling of insecurity. Time passed, and I finally put the footsteps out of my mind, at least until I left the office at dawn that morning. But a week later, it happened again. Still the same time frame, around 2 a.m. I'm adjusting a small expense item in the budget for a new project. And then those footsteps sounded again. Slowly, steadily, deliberately. This time I stiffened. My heart was pounding in my chest, so loud that I could hear it in my ears. My fingers hover over the keyboard. I was determined to ignore it, trying to convince myself that it was just an illusion caused by fatigue. But the sound continued without stopping. It even felt like it was getting closer, closer. I didn't dare turn around, just sat still, listening with all my concentration. I can count every step. 1, 2, 3. They slow down and stop, right outside my office door. The silence that followed was more terrifying than the sound of footsteps. The space was thick with tension. I could feel every hair on the back of my neck stand up. I turned around in the squeaky office chair, my eyes glued to the closed wooden door. The door was silent, the door handle motionless. The footsteps stopped. But the feeling that someone is standing right on the other side of the door becomes stronger than ever. I stood up slowly, forcing myself to breathe deeply and evenly. The room was lit only by a small desk lamp and the dim blue light from the computer screen, creating strange shadows on the walls. I'm the only one here. I know that. But why do I feel like that's not the case? I slowly walked towards the door, each step heavy. The blood in my ears was pounding, drowning out the sound of the air conditioner. My hand trembled as I touched the cold doorknob. I stopped for a second, took a deep breath, then firmly turned the doorknob and pulled hard. The hallway was again in darkness. Weird. I remember turning on the lights there when I checked last time. I reached over and turned on the switch. The familiar white light filled the space again. The hallway is empty. The silence was eerie. The other office doors remained closed and silent. My teeth clenched tightly. I looked around, half expecting, half afraid to see a colleague hiding in a hidden corner, preparing to jump out and scare me like a cruel joke. But there was no one. Absolutely no one. The cleaning crew left over an hour ago. I could clearly hear them saying goodnight to each other before the sound of their footsteps and the sound of the stroller faded away and stopped completely at the elevator. I locked the office door tightly, feeling like I was locking something invisible. I sat down on the chair, and the chair made another noise of protest. Only then did I realize my palms were wet with sweat. I quickly wiped it on my pants and let out a long breath. This continued for many weeks. Nearly every night I stayed late. Between 1:55 and 2:10 a.m., those footsteps appeared. Same hallway, same slow, steady rhythm. Sometimes they stop right outside my office door, are silent for a moment, and then move on again, as if heading toward an elevator or fire escape. Other times, they just pass by. But every time I mustered up the courage to open the door to check, whether immediately or after a while of waiting, the result was the same. Empty hallway, lights off, even though I had definitely turned them on before, and no explanation. I started to really doubt my own sanity. Am I working too hard? Is stress causing me to hear things that aren't true? I decided to seek external validation. I asked about the night guard downstairs. He was a middle-aged man who seemed trustworthy. He firmly affirmed that he did not see anyone moving on my floor at those hours. Security cameras in the main lobby also show that no one enters or leaves the building except for the cleaning crew during their regular hours, usually from 11 p.m. to about 1 a.m. I also asked the cleaning team again. They looked at me with surprise and a little concern, but they insisted that after they finished their work and left, they never returned to my floor until the next shift. I believe them. Their sincere expressions and confusion did not look like they were lying. So what are those steps? One particularly haunting night is etched into my mind. I was eating a late dinner at my desk, just a quickly purchased sandwich and a bag of chips. I feel exhausted after a long day of stressful meetings and a series of reports that need to be completed urgently. I remember glancing at the clock on my computer. 1:58 a.m. My eyes are heavy. I leaned back in my chair, took a sip of water, and closed my eyes for just a moment, trying to find a few seconds of relaxation. At that moment, I heard a very light click. It sounded like someone had just touched my office door handle from the outside. My eyes popped open. My mouth went dry immediately. My heart seemed to stop beating for a beat and then beat rapidly again. I pushed my chair back quietly, not taking my eyes off the door. The door handle never moved again. But I know what I heard. That sound was too clear, too close. And then the familiar steps began again. This time they did not pass by or come close. They are walking away from my door. A strong rush of adrenaline ran down my spine. I stood up, feeling both scared and angry. Should it be open? What if there really is someone? But what if there is no one? My chest tightened with tension. I decided to face it. I walked towards the door, slowly, trying not to make any noise. My eyes were glued to the cold metal doorknob, as if it could rotate on its own at any moment. When my hand finally touched it, the coldness of the metal seemed to penetrate my skin. I stopped for a beat, my heart beating wildly in my chest. Then I took a deep breath, turned the doorknob and pulled hard. The hallway was dark again. Hell, I'm sure I left the lights on when I entered the office in the afternoon. I reached over and turned on the switch. White light flooded in again, but the hallway remained still, silent and empty. I listened, straining my ears trying to catch any sound, no matter how small. There was only the low hum of the air conditioning system. I took a few steps outside and looked around. Everything is locked up, just like always. There was no sign that anyone had been here. I went back inside, closed the door and sat down at my desk. My hands trembled slightly. I tried to go back to work, but my mind couldn't concentrate anymore. The numbers danced meaninglessly before my eyes. Instead, I picked up my phone, scrolled through old emails, checked the news, tried anything to buy time, waited for my nerves to calm down. That's when I felt it. A strange pressure pressed on my right shoulder. It's not strong but clear. It felt warm and heavy, like a hand was placed on my shoulder from behind. I jerked forward, almost dropping the phone. My heart felt like it wanted to jump out of my chest. I jumped up from the chair and turned around immediately. There's no one. The office was empty. Just me, my desk, the computer on, and long shadows on the wall. I stared at my chair, unconsciously searching for a dent in the cushioning. Some sign that someone had just stood behind me. But nothing unusual. The chair remains the same. The air was still still. But the feeling of that hand still lingered on my shoulder. A creepy, indescribable feeling. That night, I couldn't stay another second. I quickly grabbed my things, stuffed them haphazardly into my bag, turned off the computer and rushed out of the office. I didn't even bother to check the hallway one last time. I just wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. I vividly remember feeling the tightness in my neck and the tingling sensation running up my arms as I stood waiting for the elevator. My mind raced with the thought that something or someone was actually standing behind me, touching me. But the logical side of me still tried to scream, "It's just stress. You're working too hard. You're imagining it." I tried to believe that. I really tried a lot. The next morning, when I arrived at the office with dark circles under my eyes from lack of sleep, I turned on the computer and started work as usual. But something caught my attention. A few files in the project folder I was working on last night seemed to have slightly different names. They're just very small changes, but I noticed because I'm an extremely organized person and have a very specific file naming system. For example, a file originally named nonsach underscore q2 underscore doinggsx underscore v1.xlsx is now nonsach underscore q2 underscore doinggsx underscore v1 underscore sua underscore loy.xlsx. Another file had a random underscore symbol added to the end of the name. A subfolder appears to have been renamed from Tailu Tamcow to Tailu underscore. I frowned. Could it be that last night in my panic and haste to pack my things, I accidentally changed their names? But I don't remember doing that. My process for saving and closing files is almost automatic. I never fiddle with them and rename them arbitrarily, especially when I'm stressed. I tried asking a few close colleagues if anyone had used my computer or logged in with my account last night or early this morning. They all shook their heads and looked at me with puzzled eyes. Our company has very strict rules about using other people's accounts, and accessing a colleague's computer when they are not present is taboo. No one admitted to staying late or coming into the office earlier than me. I checked the system login history myself. The last login last night and the first login this morning were both with my account at the exact time I was there. There are no signs of unauthorized access. I can't understand. This is absurd. It makes me extremely uncomfortable. These changes didn't harm the work. They were just minor name tweaks. But they were physical evidence that something unusual had happened. Something I couldn't explain. It was a silent mockery of the logic I had always worshipped. After that incident, I became more vigilant. Every night before I start working late, I make a thorough check of the entire floor, making sure every door is locked. I started to get into the habit of turning on all the lights in the hallway near my office, hoping that the light would chase away whatever was making those noises, or at least if someone was actually there, I'd want to see them. But even with the lights on, I still hear footsteps. They still appear regularly around 2 a.m. Sometimes they sound very weak and distant. Sometimes it's loud and clear, right outside the door. But no matter how fast I rushed out, the hallway was always empty. Sometimes, I have a strange feeling that those footsteps stop right where I am standing, but the air around me is completely empty. I also see more clearly the law of time. It's almost always around 2 a.m. Sometimes it's a little off, maybe 1:50 or 2:15, but never much earlier or later. This strange consistency made me gradually stop looking at the clock when I heard noises. I simply know the time has come. I tried mentioning this again to a few other colleagues, trying to act as normal as possible, not wanting to come across as paranoid. Most of them brushed it off, saying they'd never heard anything strange while staying late, or maybe it was just me being too sensitive to noise. Some people seemed a little uncomfortable talking about it, as if they didn't want to think about the possibility of something spooky existing right in their clean, modern office. My boss still maintained the same opinion, saying it was due to the HVAC system or maybe the building security patrol, although the security guard denied that they were on my floor at that hour. Despite all this, I continued to work late. I had deadlines to meet, responsibilities at work, and I told myself that I wouldn't let unexplained noises scare me to the point that I had to abandon my productive work habits. But the truth is, my nerves are tight as fiddle strings. I can clearly feel my heart rate skyrocketing every time the clock hands inch closer to the number 2. I often find myself unconsciously stopping working, holding my breath and listening, waiting in fear for the next footsteps to be heard. One night, I came up with an idea. I will use my phone to film, not only filming the hallway but also inside my office, focusing on the area behind the back of my chair. I placed the phone on a stack of books on a nearby file shelf, carefully adjusting the angle, making sure it could record both the door area and the space behind me. I want to catch evidence. Whatever. A shadow passes by, a door opens by itself, or even I react to a sound that isn't real to prove that I'm hallucinating. I pressed the record button and tried to focus on work. The air in the room seemed thicker. I could feel the presence of the phone silently recording everything. As expected, the clock hands had just turned to 2:01 a.m., and the footsteps began again. This time they stopped for a long time right outside the door. I sat quietly, trying not to breathe too hard. My eyes glanced at the phone screen displaying the live image from the camera. When the sound finally faded and disappeared, I waited a few more minutes before gingerly stood up, stopped recording, and watched the video again. On the video, I see myself sitting at work, occasionally nervously raising my head to listen. The image of the hallway through the glass window on the door, I deliberately did not close the curtain, is just a quiet darkness. The hallway light turns off by itself, but what sent chills down my spine was the sound. Except for the slight hum of the air conditioner and the sporadic sound of my typing, the recording was completely silent at the exact moment I heard footsteps clearly. No strange noises were recorded. The phone's sensitive microphone did not pick up the sound that my ears heard. And of course, there was no sight of a hand on my shoulder. The space behind me in the video is completely empty. I couldn't believe my eyes, my ears. The objective camera did not record what I experienced. This leaves only two possibilities. Either I am actually suffering from extremely severe audio hallucinations, or what I am hearing does not exist within the normal physical range. Both possibilities scare me. A chill ran down my spine, a lump in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I tried to tell myself that it was just my imagination, perhaps an auditory hallucination caused by working too late, lack of sleep, and prolonged stress. But deep inside, I know I'm not someone who easily imagines things so vividly. I am a person of numbers, of data, of real evidence. As time went on, I started to notice more strange changes in my work files. It's not just renaming files anymore. Sometimes some rows of data in a spreadsheet are mysteriously hidden. A sheet in an Excel file is renamed to a meaningless string of characters. A note I was sure had saved in the Word document disappeared. It's nothing too serious. It doesn't greatly affect my work results after I check and revise. But they are small, annoying changes that keep appearing, as if someone is deliberately teasing and testing my sanity. I continued to ask around, rechecked the system logs, and even asked the IT department to check if there was any suspicious activity on the company network. But no one admitted fault, and there was no evidence of intrusion or technical problems. Everything seemed to happen only after that strange night I felt pressure on my shoulders. I tried a few other strategies. I left a sticky note on the table with the words scrawled, "Who is there?" hoping someone would reply as a joke the next morning. The paper still lay there without a single response. I intentionally left the hallway light on all night. I still heard footsteps. I even tried disconnecting my computer from the local network before leaving for the night, just to see if any remote login activity was going on. But the next morning, I still found small, inexplicable changes on files saved locally on my hard drive. It was completely meaningless. After many months like this, I gradually had to accept a hard-to-swallow truth. Something inexplicable was happening in this office, at least to me. My colleagues also seemed to sense my stress and obsession. They stopped asking about it, perhaps thinking I was just stressed or exhausted. But I know what I heard, what I felt, what I saw evidenced through the altered files. Some nights, the footsteps were so clear that I was sure someone was standing right behind that wooden door, just a few feet away from me. But every time I mustered up the courage to open the door, what greeted me was still a dark hallway, no matter how many times I turned on the light, eerie silence. I still don't know what to believe. A rational part of me still tried to cling to plausible explanations. Some mechanical failure in the building structure, a strange sound system failure, or maybe it was my own mind creating these illusions. But that doesn't explain the files being intentionally changed, even if just minor changes. Another part of me, the part one tried to suppress, wondered if I had accidentally stumbled upon something beyond common understanding. Something invisible but conscious. I don't have concrete evidence. I don't have a reasonable explanation. I just had repeated experiences, night after night, in the solitude of an empty office building. I still work there. I still have to stay late. My job doesn't change, and deadlines wait for no one. But now, every time the clock approaches 2 a.m., my chest tightens, my shoulders tense, and my palms sweat. I tried to continue working, but part of my mind was always on guard, waiting for those familiar footsteps to ring out. I gripped the chair armrest tightly, debating internally whether I should rush out to check again or try to ignore it. Most nights, I still choose to look, and most nights, I still find nothing. Before leaving the office each foggy morning, I perform one final check almost instinctively. I double-checked the names of important files, saved my work carefully, and locked the computer. I walked around the floor, making sure every other office door was securely locked. Then I stepped into the elevator, feeling the unsettling weight in my chest, the unshakable feeling that something was watching me from the darkness of the hallway. Sometimes, I couldn't help but glance back over my shoulder, but the hallway was always empty, silent under the cold white light. I wish I could say I found the answer, or that one day, it all suddenly stopped. But no, it still continues. Maybe one day I'll find an explanation, or maybe I'll have to learn to live with it. I go about my work, trying not to think too much about my 2 a.m. steps, the invisible pressure on my shoulders, or the files that keep mysteriously being renamed. It has become part of my routine, a disturbing habit, but still part of my life in this place. I locked the office door, turned off the hallway light, even though I knew it would probably turn on or off by itself, and left with my heart racing, wondering every time I returned the next day, what new things I would find. I never thought I would feel so insecure and scared in a seemingly harmless and modern place, a place that looked so quiet and safe during the day. That contrast further increases the obsession. Work pressure and strange experiences at the office began to erode my mental health. I have constant insomnia, always feel stressed and irritable. I decided I needed a change, a quiet moment to escape that familiar, haunting environment. I need quiet, not the creepy quiet of the office at night, but the real quiet of nature. I received a small grant to conduct a personal environmental research project, focusing on coastal water quality. This is the perfect opportunity. I was looking for a temporary place to live, away from noisy tourist areas, and I found it a small, old-looking house, sitting alone on a remote beach, a few miles from the nearest town. The rent was very reasonable, and the landlord, who lived a few hours away, seemed accommodating over the phone. He said it was very quiet, perfect for someone who needed to concentrate on their studies. I went there on a sunny Tuesday afternoon. My Jeep was the only car on the small dirt road leading to the house. The beach stretched before my eyes, almost wild. In the distance, I could only see the silhouette of an elderly man patiently sitting and fishing at the water's edge. In addition, there is only white sand, blue sea and whispering wind. The silence here is completely different. It is vast, natural, and, at first, it brings a real sense of peace. The house looks exactly like the picture, small. A bit old. The white paint has started to peel in some places because of the sea salt, but still seems sturdy. Inside there is a living room with a worn sofa, a small kitchen, a bedroom, and a simple bathroom. The most prominent feature is the large glass door in the living room, overlooking a small wooden porch and the immense beach. From the porch, just take a few steps and your feet will touch the fine sand. The kitchen also has a separate door, made of solid wood, also leading to the sea. This door looks more sturdy, has a deadbolt and a locking chain inside. I spent the first afternoon moving things into the house. I didn't bring much, mainly research equipment, water testing kit, sample containers, some clothes, notebooks, and laptop. The air in the house has a slightly musty and sea salt smell, but just open the windows and the fresh ocean breeze flows in, taking away that old smell. I quickly checked the basic amenities. The faucet in the bathroom works well. The water flows quite strongly. The toilet flushes normally. The stove in the kitchen is a bit old and has a faint smell of grease, but it still ignites and works. The refrigerator rattles and vibrates slightly when running, but it's cold enough to preserve samples and some food. Everything seems fine enough for a few weeks of my research. I spent the rest of the day walking along the shore, collecting my first water samples in the shallow water near the shore. The sun is warm. The sky is blue without a single cloud, and the wind blows gently. I feel relaxed. The accumulated stress from work and strange events at the office seem to disappear with each wave crashing on the shore. The isolation of this place, which at first seemed a bit scary, now became a refreshing balm. The mobile phone signal here is very weak and intermittent, only enough to send a few short messages.